In 1963, the most admired star in Hollywood became the most feared co-star. Heston wrote after a bad movie, "I'd rather stick needles in my eyes than work with her again." Why? Her awful breath. He was always late, and she betrayed him so badly that he wouldn't even look at her on set. Now, after 60 years, we tell you what really happened between Moses and his main lady, and we explain how their fight changed Hollywood forever. His birthday is October 4th, 1923, and he was born in No Man's Land, Illinois. In the 1930s, his parents, Lila and Russell Carter, were having a hard time keeping their sawmill going. Life was hard for the family, and they had to move around a lot to find better chances. His parents split up when he was 10 years old, which was a shocking and painful event for him. After that, his mother married Chester Heston, and Charlton took his stepfather's last name, which is how we all know him today. He was different even when he was a child. Everyone was amazed when, as a 5-year-old, he read The Night Before Christmas out loud while standing on a tree stump in the town square. Charlton got his start as an actor by accident when he was in high school. When he was at New Trier High School in Illinois, he didn't have high hopes for the school play, The Wrecker's Daughter. He was shocked when he got the lead part. This sudden event made him want to become an actor. Priscilla Weaver, his drama teacher, saw how talented he was right away and began giving him difficult parts. One of them was Macbeth, where Charlton used his powerful voice to take over the stage, even though he was terrified of acting. The hard work and natural ability of the person caught the attention of a talent scout from Northwestern University. In 1941, he was given a scholarship to study theater. Charlton became really into acting while he was at Northwestern. He pushed himself to the limit by taking on 30 parts in just 2 years. He often only got 4 hours of sleep each night because he had so much to do. He played Peer Gynt in a low-budget student film, which was one of the best parts of this time. Even though it wasn't a big production, this movie was his unofficial start. He also met Lydia Clark in college while she was in a play. They got married in 1944 after falling in love. Their marriage lasted an amazing 64 years, making it one of the few relationships in Hollywood that lasted that long. Charlton joined the Army Air Forces in 1944 when World War II started. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, he thought it was his job to serve. As part of his training, he learned how to be a radio operator and a gunner for B-25 airplanes. He was sent to the cold and remote Aleutian Islands. It was very hard, with freezing weather and long stretches of being alone. During one mission, his plane had to stop on a small island because of an emergency. He and his team were stuck for 3 days before they were found and saved. Even with all of these problems, Charlton used his free time to learn how to act and memorize Shakespeare's works, which showed how committed he was to his job. They went to New York City after the war to follow their dream of working in theater. They had a small flat in Hell's Kitchen and worked as models for artists to make money. Charlton's big break came on Broadway in 1947, getting a part in a new production of Antony and Cleopatra by William Shakespeare. Even though it was a supporting part, critics and people who work in the business noticed how strong he was on stage. He started to be in TV shows as well, giving a great performance in Wuthering Heights on CBS. Hal B. Wallace, a movie producer in Hollywood, saw him perform and gave him a role in one of his films. Charlton was unsure at first, but in the end agreed. He planned to make just one movie to see how it went. Dark City, which came out in 1950, was his first movie. In it, he played a side hustler. It wasn't a big hit, but it showed that Charlton could be a good main man. Then, in 1951, something strange happened. As Charlton walked around the Paramount lot, he saw the famous director Cecil B. DeMille and chose to wave at him. For some reason, that small thing interested DeMille. After this, DeMille quickly put Charlton in the world's best show in 1952. The movie was huge and was about a circus. Charlton played the tough boss of the circus, Brad Brayton. Real circus artists were in the show, and Charlton even trained with elephant handlers to get ready for the part. He just barely escaped being run over by a scared elephant while filming. It was a big hit, won the Academy Award for Best Picture, and made Charlton a star in Hollywood. Charlton Heston was one of the most famous actors of his time, especially for his memorable parts in films about the Bible and history. His big break came when he played Moses in The Ten Commandments, 1956. This part changed his life for good. The director Cecil B. DeMille chose Heston because he thought he looked a lot like the famous figure of Moses by Michelangelo. Heston was a great fit because of how he looked and how strong he was. The movie cost a huge $13 million, which was a lot of money back then. Heston trained very hard for the part. He got a beard and hair, lost 30 pounds, and even learnt Hebrew and Egyptian to make it all seem real. Something scary happened during the well-known Red Sea scene. Heston was washed away by the water because of a mistake by the CGI team. The team quickly saved him, which was good. It's interesting to know that Heston also played the voice of God in the scene with the burning bush. He thought this was weird and funny at the same time because it meant he was acting against himself. The movie was a huge hit, making $122.7 million at the box office and becoming the biggest hit of 1956. It's still shown on TV every Easter, and Heston's performance as Moses is still thought to be one of the best in Bible history. His next big part was as Judah Ben-Hur in the 1959 movie Ben-Hur. This was the most important job he had ever had. He wasn't the first choice, though. The story wasn't good enough for Burt Lancaster, so he turned it down. He turned them down because he didn't want to wear a shirt. Before he got the part in January 1958, even Leslie Nielsen was considered. Making the movie was a huge job. The $15 million that MGM spent was the most ever at that time. Heston put in a lot of work to get the part. He practiced 5 hours a day for more than 4 months to learn how to drive a chariot. In the famous chariot race, he did a lot of his own tricks. At one point in the movie, Heston almost fell out of the chariot, which could have been very bad. He worked hard, and the Oscar for Best Actor was his prize. Some people thought Jack Lemmon should have won for his part in Some Like It Hot. But Heston's performance was too strong to pass up. He was the star of the whole 3.5-hour movie and was in almost every scene. Ben-Hur was a big hit and won 11 Oscars, which was a record until 1997, when Titanic beat it. Heston became known as the actor Hollywood cast in parts from history and the Bible. During his career, he played 14 famous figures, which is a huge amount. Mark Antony in a 1950 version of Julius Caesar was one of his first jobs. In later years, he played John the Baptist in The Greatest Story Ever Told, 1965, Michelangelo in The Agony and the Ecstasy, 1965, and Andrew Jackson in The President's Lady, 1953. He was known as Hollywood's go-to guy for God and country because he could make these unrealistic figures come to life on screen. He is known as one of the best actors of all time because of his work in The Ten Commandments and Ben-Hur. His memory lives on. Their first movie together was El Cid, which came out in 1961. It was a big project with 2 big stars, but the fights they had on set made it famous. Samuel Bronston, the producer, wanted both Heston and Lauren because they were well-known and would draw a lot of people. It was Heston's first choice to play the Spanish hero Rodrigo Diaz de Viva after he played the lead role in Ben-Hur. Heston didn't like the story at first. He thought it was at best okay and at worst terrible. He liked the character, though, so he agreed to go to Madrid and meet Bronston, Anthony Mann, who directed, and Philip Yordan, who wrote the script. Heston signed on July 26, 1960, after talking about the part. I had a hard time getting Lauren to play Shameen. At first, she couldn't do it, so the producers looked at other actors, such as Ava Gardner and Jean Moreau. A story went around that Anthony Mann wanted his wife, Sarah Montiel, to get the part. But Heston and Bronston both said no. Lauren finally got free, but she could only work for 10 to 12 weeks. Bronston used a $1 million offer to get her. She was only the second actor after Elizabeth Taylor to get paid that much for a movie. Lauren was also given $200 a week to pay her own barber. Heston didn't like this, and it was one of many things that worked against him while they were shooting. The trouble began before the shooting even began. Just 2 days before shooting, Loren asked for changes to be made to the script. Ben Barsman, a writer on a blacklist, had to be hired by the producer to rewrite the story. Someone else, Basilio Franchina, was also hired by Loren to translate her lines into Italian and then back to plain English. These delays made Heston and Mann angry because they were ready to work with the first draft. Lauren's concern for how she looked made things worse. Putting on makeup and hair took hours, which slowed down shooting. These nice things were in her contract, but they slowed things down. She once insisted on making last-minute changes to her costume, which caused an important fight scene to be pushed back. The company lost $50,000 because of the delay, and Heston was very angry. He was always on time and did his job well, so having to wait in the hot sun for hours in full armor made him even more angry. In his diary, Heston wrote that Sophia's tardiness on December 3, 1960, was not only unprofessional, but also rude to everyone involved in the production. Loren came almost 4 hours late. During breaks, she insisted on eating Italian food with lots of garlic, and Heston moaned about her pizza breath during close-ups. So, the schedule had to be changed in a weird way to keep her meal breaks away from their scenes. Heston hit his breaking point when he asked for a body double for the close-ups of Lauren. When there was a love scene on April 7th, 1961, Heston wouldn't film directly with Lauren. They said it was impossible because they couldn't get along with each other. Rafael Albasan, a Spanish actor, was hired to fill in for Heston during Lauren's close-ups. She first didn't know about the body double. On May 10th, 1961, she found out when she walked onto the set and saw Albasan dressed as Heston. She was shocked and mad, causing the director and producer to have a big fight. When the Spanish news came out with a story called "American Star Refuses to Face Italian Beauty," things got worse. The worst part of the movie for Heston and Loren was the death scene, where El Cid dies in Chimen's arms. At first, Heston refused to let them film the scene. He agreed to do it under strict rules like limiting the number of takes and keeping the team small after 3 days of talks. Heston and Lauren were still angry with each other after El Cid was over. They didn't say much to each other at the movie premiere in London on December 6th, 1961. They only stood for pictures because they had to. Heston later said he wouldn't work with Lauren again. He turned down a part in Lady L that he was offered with her. He told his employer in a letter, "I'd rather stick needles in my eyes than work with Lauren again." In an interview in 1966, Lauren spoke out in support of her. "Charlton is a great actor, but our ways of working are very different. Their fight also hurt their jobs. The people in charge didn't want to cast them together again, not wanting more trouble." In his autobiography, Heston wrote about tough people he worked with on set to show how important it is to be professional. Lauren became known for being more professional as her career went on. In her autobiography, she talked about the mistakes she made in the past and said, "Every movie teaches you something. There are lessons about life and lessons about playing, and sometimes about you." People still talked about their fight decades later. In 2011, the 50th anniversary of El Cid, neither Heston nor Lauren went to the event. This showed how much the war had affected them. One of the most famous behind-the-scenes stories in Hollywood is about how they fought at the start of the movie. When they worked together again, it was on the 1963 movie 55 Days at Peking, but there were a lot of troubles and disagreements. The movie was shot in Spain, and things went badly from the start. When Heston got to the set on May 15th, 1962, he found that the script was missing parts. There were only 140 pages of a shortened version of the story. Because of this lack of planning, the 17 weeks of filming were very hard. As soon as they met, it was clear that Heston and Gardner did not get along. Gardner had a drink party for the cast and crew at her Madrid flat on June 2nd. At first, the party seemed friendly, but by June 10th, Heston wrote in his journal that the character's love story seemed very random and that the language was very simple. The conditions for shooting were tough. It was very hot in Madrid in the summer, often above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Everyone lost their cool because of the heavy outfits and difficult action scenes. Gardner got into a heated argument with director Nicholas Ray on July 3rd and stormed off set, which pushed back shooting by 4 hours. Trouble with the budget made things even worse. The budget for the movie went from $7 million to over $17 million by the time filming finished on September 28, 1962. Everyone was tired from the endless delays and stress, but on May 29, 1963, the movie finally came out. The cast and team, on the other hand, talked about the hard time for years. Ava Gardner's actions on the set caused a lot of trouble. On June 5, 1962, she was 45 minutes late to the script reading and clearly drunk when she got there. It became a big problem for her to drink. She often showed up drunk, even as early as 10 a.m. She got there so drunk on July 12th that she forgot her lines, which slowed down shooting for 3 hours. What she did without warning made things worse. She left the set in the middle of a scene, saying she was too tired to keep going. This meant that the team had to throw out the whole day's work, which cost them $50,000. In a fit of anger on August 17th, she threw a prop vase at a cameraman, just missing him but ruining expensive gear. Gardner's mood swings and drinking also affected how she played roles. She had a hard time remembering her lines, and even easy scenes often took more than one take. Because she couldn't concentrate, it took her 27 takes to finish a simple conversation scene on September 5th. Late starts, reshoots, and extra pay for her behavior added at least $2 million to the cost of making the movie by the end of shooting. There was so much stress on set that some crew members asked to be moved to different units so they wouldn't have to work with her. Charlton Heston, who was known for being very professional, was very angry with Gardner. On July 20th, 1962, he wrote in his diary, "Ava showed up 3 hours late today and smelt like gin. It is getting harder and harder to work with her. It's shocking how careless she is." He wrote on August 8th that it was yet another day lost while he waited for Ava to remember her lines. "This woman is putting the whole show off track by herself." Heston was more honest about how he felt after the movie came out. He told Photoplay magazine in September 1963, "Working with Ava Gardner was without a doubt the most difficult experience of my career. Not only was she acting badly, but it was also bad for the whole filming process." His book, In the Arena, which came out in 1995, wrote that Ava Gardner was a mess on the set of 55 Days of Peking. Every day was a test of patience because she was always late, didn't seem to care about the other players, and was often drunk. "I'm not exaggerating when I say it was the worst time working with a co-star." He also talked about what happened on August 25th, when Gardner showed up drunk, stumbled through her lines, and yelled at the director and several team members. She turned against Heston when he tried to help. He said, "It took all of my professional courage not to leave the set right then and there." Heston also said that Ava's performance in 55 Days was saved more by the editor than by any effort on her part in a 1970 talk about film commentary. It was shockingly low, the number of good takes. Even though he was mad at her, Heston accepted her star power in an American film interview in 1980, saying, "For all her flaws, and there were many of them, Ava had an undeniable screen presence. She could be mesmerizing when she was able to get herself together, which didn't happen very often enough." After more than 10 years, Heston and Gardner worked together again on Earthquake in 1974. After their rough past, many people were surprised when they agreed to work together again. Heston wasn't sure about taking the part, but the $600,000 pay made him do it. Things were going well at first. On February 10th, 1974, Heston wrote in his diary, "Ava seems different. It's more centered and less volatile. Time may have made us both calmer. But by the third week, things were getting worse again. It got very heated when Gardner showed up 2 hours late and drunk on February 25th. Heston is said to have yelled, 'It's like 55 days all over again.' Even with these problems, they were able to finish the movie. The earthquake scenes, which were shot with cutting-edge sense-around technology, brought the two stars closer together. In her book, Gardner wrote, "Charlton and I may have had our disagreements, but when those tremors started, we were in it together. Nothing puts past disagreements in perspective like going through hard times together." When Earthquake came out in November 1974, critics praised how well they worked together on screen. Roger Ebert wrote, "Whatever real-life tension there is between these two stars has been alchemized into a compelling portrayal of a marriage in crisis." In an interview in 1985, Heston talked about their work together in a more positive light, saying, "Working with Ava on Earthquake was, let's say, an opportunity for growth. We both played our best, maybe because we both wanted to prove something to the other person. Even though they had problems, their shows were memorable." The love story Charlton Heston had was very different from most in Hollywood. They were married in 1944 and were together for 64 years, until he died in 2008. It was in an acting class at Northwestern University that they met. She didn't like him at all at first. She believed he was cocky and full of himself. Their first date, though, changed everything. They talked, and Lydia fell in love with him right away. She said yes to his marriage proposal through a letter, which we find funny now, but thought was sweet at the time. Their small wedding took place on March 17th, 1944, right before Heston left for the war. The wedding wasn't complicated. Heston bought Lydia's ring for only $12. She wore a violet dress and hat that matched. Heston later said that picture of her would always be in his thoughts. After many years, they had a big party to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary. More than 200 family and friends dressed in black tie came. As a unique gift, Heston even made booklets called Pursuing Lydia, which are a chapter from his future autobiography. He added diamonds to Lydia's original engagement ring for this important event, which was a kind and caring thing to do. In a strange way, Heston and Lydia became parents. They had a hard time having kids for a long time before they adopted their son Fraser in 1955. Lydia found out she was pregnant after only 3 months. When their daughter Holly was born in 1961, they went from not having any kids to having two right away. Fraser became a director as an adult and even directed his father in Treasure Island. Holly tried singing for a while, but in the end she chose a less busy life. Back then, it wasn't common for big stars to be active with their kids like Heston was. Holly said she loved that he always gave her his full attention when they were together. Heston began to play different types of roles as his work went on. He changed roles from being the main hero to more complicated ones in the 1970s and 1980s. Cardinal Richelieu in The Three Musketeers was one of his most talked about parts. It was very different from his normal heroic roles because he played a character who was sneaky and cruel. They thought it was great and one of his best efforts. At this time, Heston also appeared in a lot of disaster films, which were very popular. He was in films like Earthquake and Airport 1975. Censor Round was used in theaters for Earthquake to make the seats shake like they were in an actual earthquake. There was also a movie called Motherlode that Heston directed in 1982. It was written by his son Fraser. Heston tried something new, even though it didn't do very well. Planet of the Apes and Soylent Green gave him some of his most well-known parts. Heston played an astronaut in Planet of the Apes who lands on a planet where smart apes rule. He figures out it's really Earth at the very end, which is one of the most shocking finishes in movie history. People still remember Heston's sad line, "You maniacs, you blew it up." For the follow-up, he agreed to show up, but only if his character died, and he gave his whole pay to charity. In Soylent Green, he played a detective in a world where there wasn't enough food for everyone and there were too many people. The big surprise that Soylent Green is made from dead bodies became famous. A touching fact about the making of the movie is that Heston's co-star Edward G. Robinson was dying of cancer while it was being shot. His very last scene in the movie was also his very last scene in real life. After the fact, Heston said that the thought of Robinson shooting his own death scene, knowing that it was the end, kept coming back to him. Heston was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President George W. Bush in 2003. This award came a year after Heston said he was showing signs of Alzheimer's disease. He went to the event with grace, even though his health was getting worse. He won the award for his work as an actor, including his part as Moses in the Ten Commandments, and for his political work, especially as president of the NRA. "From my cold, dead hands" became his famous line. Even though he was sick, his last public appearance as NRA head was powerful. He raised the gun one last time to show that he was unbreakable. The world heard some bad news from Charlton Heston in August 2002. In a video message, he said that doctors had told him he might have Alzheimer's disease. He was 78 years old. At that time, popular people didn't often talk about their own health problems in this way, so this was a big deal. Heston talked in the video in a cool but emotional way. He said, "I feel like I need to say these words now, because I might not be able to when the time comes." When he said, "I'm neither giving up nor giving in," his fans praised his strength, being as brave as he was in his movies. He had been in a clinic just 2 years before for alcohol rehab. This news made the problems he was already having worse. Heston's news came 8 years after Ronald Reagan, his friend, told everyone that he had Alzheimer's. They were both larger than life, and they were both going through the same thing. Many people praised Heston's choice to go public. Some said it was brave and could make other people less afraid to talk about their own health problems. After this, Heston started to stay out of the public eye. Since he had been a Hollywood star for more than 50 years, this was hard for him. He once said, "The loss of an actor's audience is the worst loss of all." He also quit as head of the National Rifle Association in 2003. His final speech at their convention was one that everyone will remember. Sadly, the illness got worse very quickly. This was only 3 years after he was diagnosed in 2005. His family and friends were shocked at how much he had changed. The actor who used to play strong heroes was too weak to get out of bed. This broke the hearts of fans who loved him as Moses in the Ten Commandments and as Judah Ben-Hur in Ben-Hur. Charles Heston died at his home in Beverly Hills on April 5, 2008. He was 84 years old, and Lydia, his wife of 64 years, was with him. It was later said that he had died of pneumonia, which happens a lot to people with Alzheimer's. People from all over the world sent their condolences as soon as they heard about his death. In an interview, President George W. Bush said that he was a good guy with a big heart. A lot of people remembered what a great actor he was and others admired his work in the civil rights movement and afterward as an advocate for gun rights. His funeral took place at his church in Pacific Palisades on April 12, 2008. Nancy Reagan, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Tom Selleck, and Christian Bale were among the 250 people who showed up. It made me think of how much he had changed Hollywood and politics.